Good afternoon, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. It is Boxing Day today, and this in Canada is a holiday similar to the Black Friday in the United States. There's a lot of sales today, and a lot of people are out shopping. I'm avoiding that mess and staying home and playing some Global War 1939. This is a continuation, round 13 summary. And some things to get into. Stalingrad has been liberated by the Russians. That is a massive turn of events. The Russian economy was getting weaker and weaker, and the Turks and the Brits have come up and liberated the Caucasus and Baku. The Turks came into the Black Sea aided by the Italian transports, and did a landing with a cavalry, 2 infantry, and an artillery. So the Germans are being pushed almost entirely out of Moscow or Russia on the Eastern Front. The Russians did do their big attack into Western Ukraine, and they knocked the Russians down about 32 or 33 infantry. They lost about 30 ground units of their own, and they decided after round 2 to retreat and survive another day and not risk losing their armor and aircraft because they wanted that mobility. But the Germans going this way, this means the Battle of the Bulge. The airborne has responded nuts, and as of now, the Allies have significant numbers in Paris, and this means the entire Luftwaffe, which is in Romania, cannot make it back to Paris next turn to attack. So that was a win in terms of momentum swing for the Allies. Also, Italy has upgraded their miner to a major factory. The Turks have landed a couple of their fighters in Rome to scramble. And Germany is just slowly being surrounded. Last turn, there was a British tank in the Baltic states, which the Germans took back. However, in doing that, they did not attack Valkyrie, so they did not get their free infantry in Finland this turn. Russia did not do a build this turn, again in Moscow, despite the fact that Germany has significant numbers here. In Romania, they just backed up one space and left a buffer. So they could do a build in Moscow next turn. Currently, the Germans have the advantage by about 12 units or so because they did do a large build in Romania this turn. And the Turks are also, with the Italians and the French, came into Bulgaria, so they took Bulgaria. And they still have Yugoslavia, and they took Greece. So Greece is going to be safe next turn with about 6 units. And there's a small contingent of Italians and Turks making their way west. The Brits here in Cairo built a couple artillery and infantry ready to jump on these 3 transports next time. And this navy will be supported by the Turkish Navy as a convoy. And the British sent their tanks up into Baku, which we talked about, and they've got about 12 units here in the Middle East. So now they control the entire Middle East, and they did a token landing here in Bombay, and they moved their navy back to protect it. And we'll get into Japan in a little while. But the Americans, they could have brought over 7 armor and 7 infantry, and they decided to do something else. The German Kriegsmarine is up here off of the Finnish coast, threatening to head into the convoy zone of the Russians, and the Allies saw that coming, so they moved their navy back to eastern Canada to take out that navy should it go into the convoy zone of the Russians. America has sent all its transports back to eastern United States and drove their 7 armor to the Great Plains. And why would they do that? Why would the Americans not reinforce Western Europe? Well, that's because currently math dictates the Allies have about combined like over 100 units here in Paris. Paris has a fortification there. The French build a minor factory this turn so they can start building units. Italy's got a healthy economy. I think they have 36 IPP. The British, oh, we forgot to talk about the British because I wanted to point this out. They built a Comet tank this round and some Churchills. So they are starting to build some heavy movers or fast movers or heavy hitters, whatever you want to call them. So that is a single Comet tank down there and the Churchill. So, but currently the Allies, in terms of defense, have about over 100 units, and the Germans can only attack them next turn with about 62. So because the Luftwaffe has flown away, now mind you, the Germans do have a massive contingent here of units waiting in Western Germany. That's about 15, another 20 units there. So if the Luftwaffe comes back and Germany does do a heavy build next turn of fast movers, Paris is under threat again. So it's a game of seesaw, a game of attrition. And it seems like now, Germany's surrounded. And whichever, like they could take back Rome, they could push hard into Russia, they could, take back this, the Finnish territories. They probably could push into Turkey if they wanted to. They probably could try and push the Allies off the continent of Europe. But whichever way they seem to push, it seems like the Allies seem to chip away at their heels in all of the other areas. They are surrounded. So whatever the Germans do, it's tough, and they need to have the mobility of their air force. So that has kind of also kept the Allies at bay from deciding to go full in and attack. So they're kind of almost a game of waiting. Whichever way the Germans go, the Allies will then sort of bite at their heels in the other direction. So that's kind of happening here. It's kind of an interesting standoff. Definitely Berlin is a long way from being under threat. The German economy is slowly getting smaller. It's down to about 67 IPP. So just with the French, the British are now 53 IPP. The French are at 14. The Italians are at 36. And the Russians now, I think they're about 45 IPP next turn. So the Russians did do another heavy build in Novosibirsk. They do not want to lose this territory to the Japanese. And they figure by doing this, they are also, in a way, because once the Japan takes this major factory, it downgrades to a minor, which also then means the Japanese can build at this factory. Unless, of course, the Russians decide to destroy it and walk away and retreat. But then, basically, if that was a scenario, what's preventing all of these forces here from heading west to try and surround Moscow, to try and take back Leningrad? The Russians do not want that. So sometimes when you're trying to play defense, you have to play a little bit of offense. So the Russians are, and you know what? The Japanese could say, ha ha ha, you built there. We're just gonna blitz through and go to southern Kazakh, which they could do, which then they're on the doorstep of Moscow, another 2 steps away. So that could be the scenario. The Germans, they have the numerical advantage by about 12 units here. So that could be an interesting scenario if that plays out. Currently in Calcutta, there's just a slow build up because there's a military base there, which I don't know if you guys can see. The British also have a military base in Iraq, just to point that out. Now, there's about 6 submarines here and a scramble off of Siam. So currently, these 2 navies here, this Italian Navy, which has got a coastal battleship, a Brazilian coastal battleship, don't want to get too close to each other because this Navy here, if it attacks, this Navy over here could wipe it out because it's got Air Force and a carrier But they do not want to be attacked because they have submarines which do not defend very well. So a little bit of a cat and mouse game going off here in South Asia and off of Madras and the Middle East. So that's kind of an interesting scenario. The Allies are going to get support from the Turkish Navy that's coming down. The Japanese did not do much of a build here on the mainland. They did bring some guys from the islands back, but it's a long way away from getting up to Novosibirsk, which it would be suicide for the Japanese to attack. So what did the Japanese do in the Pacific? Well, they did another massive build. They brought their transports here, which they can load another 6 transports next turn. And they decided to go and take Midway, which the Americans have destroyed their air and naval base. However, the Japanese are getting into position. They're getting into position to do now they're a triple threat. They cannot hit San Francisco next turn because that is still 3 spaces away. However, they could hit Hawaii and they still could hit Northwest United States or Western Canada. So they currently have about 50 units next turn. They can hit this. Actually, you can hit the U.S. fleet. It's safe for one more turn because it is off of San Francisco. So the America saw this coming. They decided to bring a couple of their fast movers up to Western or British Columbia, and so currently the Canadians have, I think, 4 armor and 3 infantry, and another armor in reserve in Alberta. And so if the Japanese want to come here, they have 6 loaded transports next turn. They could come easily wipe this out. But that means the Americans who have their fast movers in, looks like the Oregon area, what is this called? Western United States, the area surrounding San Francisco with, they've got about 5 fast movers and their armor that are in the Great Plains that can take anything back. They've also got their B-29 and their Air Force all in range. So the Americans are not napping. They are prepared. They currently have, now they're joined by the Italian Navy. Their Navy is about 55 units. So numerically, the Americans have the advantage. That's why they spent in the Pacific. They do not want to lose this initiative. They do not want San Francisco to be under threat. However, next turn, if the Japanese build a naval base here in Midway, now all of a sudden San Francisco is under threat, Hawaii is under threat, and Western Canada is under threat. And that scenario is dangerous because America cannot defend it all. So probably what would happen is, do the Japanese pick a softer target, which is Hawaii, which is about 20 ground units there right now. So America could build a fortification in Hawaii, but Hawaii is under threat. I think that's sort of a summary of the round, folks. And just a sort of lesson, because I'm sure we've all been there, but in a scenario where America is coming after Tokyo or Japan is coming after San Francisco, in this game, basically whoever is doing the attacking is 2 turns away. And this gives the advantage to the defender because they can see you coming. They know, are you building transports or are you building more Navy to attack? And so when you see that coming, you build the appropriate ground forces to do a counterattack if they're building transports, or you decide to build a Navy in defense. So you always have the numerical advantage. You're always deterring them away to keep building and keep building and keep building. And that's what's happening here, folks. So that is my message, is do never, ever, ever, if you're deciding to go full Europe, to ignore San Francisco. Because once the Japanese get in here, like if you're to land, say, 12 loaded transports, so say eventually they drop off 24 units, well that is detrimental. Or if the US Navy is in position to get wiped out, that is a game changer. All of a sudden the Axis have the advantage. So even though it's a slow battle of attrition in the Atlantic, it is a slow battle of attrition in terms of naval superiority. And also now ground superiority in the Pacific. So very interesting dynamic happening out. I have to say, I do feel now, given the US build here, that the Axis are at a disadvantage in the Pacific and the Atlantic for the first time. So currently the Japan economy is still healthy at 133 IPP. So what's going to happen, folks? And stay tuned for round 14. Thank you for watching.